The victory over the Zatorians sent ripples through the galaxy that were felt by even the most powerful civilizations. Earth, once a quiet, insignificant speck in the vastness of space, was now a force to be reckoned with. The mighty Zatorian Empire, which had once believed in its absolute superiority, had been humbled, and in the wake of their defeat, something incredible happened. Humanity had earned the respect of the galaxy. Where once they were dismissed as weak and unworthy of attention, they were now recognized for their strength, their resolve, and their unexpected ability to stand against even the most powerful empires. Earth was no longer a mere observer of the cosmos. It was a rising power, a new player in the intergalactic stage. The arc light stood at the center of this transformation. No longer just a symbol of human achievement, the ship had become a testament to what humanity could accomplish when united. It had led the charge in defeating the Zatorians, but it had also proven to the galaxy that humans were not to be underestimated. As the arc light drifted through space, its hull gleaming with the legacy of humanity's first great victory, it became a symbol of creativity, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of a species that had fought for its future and won. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth began to rebuild not just its own defenses, but also its relationships with the alien civilizations it had once feared. The human race, which had been isolated for so long, now had the opportunity to create alliances, share knowledge, and engage in trade with species that had once viewed them as primitive. The galaxy was no longer an untouchable and distant place. It was a place of possibility. Earth's diplomatic envoys were welcomed into meetings with long-established powers, who now saw them not as the underdog, but as a partner. The Arclight and the victory it represented had changed everything. What was once considered an impossible dream was now within reach. Humanity had a place among the stars. For the first time, the human race looked to the future with optimism. No longer did they fear being overwhelmed by more powerful civilizations. They now had the ability to stand tall beside them. The lessons learned from the battle, the unity forged through adversity, had strengthened humanity in ways no one could have predicted. Now they were determined to prove that they could not only defend their home, but could also contribute to the betterment of the galaxy. They were ready to take their place, to ensure that Earth's voice would be heard alongside the oldest and most influential species in the universe. Humanity was entering a new era, one where their ingenuity and their spirit would guide them through the stars. With the Arclight at the forefront, Earth began to explore distant worlds, seeking to build peaceful relationships with other civilizations, and to expand its knowledge of the universe. But unlike before, humanity no longer approached the cosmos with fear or hesitation. Instead, they moved forward with confidence, driven by the lessons of their past and the promise of a brighter future. For the first time in history, Earth was truly united. The divisions that once plagued them, whether political, social, or economic, had been swept away by a shared cause. The struggle for survival against the Zatorians had forged a bond between all of humanity, and now, as they ventured out into the stars, that unity would serve as their foundation. They were no longer divided by borders or ideologies. The human race had learned that their true strength came from their ability to come together, to fight together, and to build a future together. The universe, once vast and uncaring, had opened its doors to Earth. Now, humanity had a seat at the table. They had proven that they could rise above their circumstances, that they were capable of achieving greatness. The Arclight, a symbol of humanity's journey from underdog to galactic power, would continue to lead them on their path forward. With each new alliance they forged, with each new world they explored, they would remind the galaxy of one simple truth. Earth was no longer the forgotten planet at the edge of the cosmos. It was a new force in the universe, and it was here to stay. The galaxy was vast, yes, but now Earth had its place among the stars. and no one would ever forget the price that was paid to earn it. Dr. Gilak stood over the injured soldier, his thoughts racing. He had come here to help, but now he was learning something far greater. That sometimes it wasn't the medicine or the technology that mattered most. It was the strength of the human heart. And that strength, Dr. Gilak realized, could not be measured or taught. It simply was. Sergeant Kieran Holt lay motionless on the medical cot, his body pale and covered in sweat. The blood loss was severe, and though Dr. Gilak's advanced Zetharian techniques had stabilized him, the weight of the wounds was crushing. His lungs struggled to fill with air, his heart barely maintaining a rhythm. The energy blast that had torn through Holt's body had left more than physical scars. It had drained his will. As Dr. Gilak worked tirelessly to keep him alive, the medic couldn't shake the growing sense of doubt gnawing at him. Zetharian medicine, with all its precision and advanced tools, could repair broken bones, regenerate organs, and even heal wounds that would be considered fatal on other planets. Yet here, on Earth, it seemed that no matter how well he treated the soldiers, something more elusive held the key to their survival. It wasn't the science that kept them going. It was something far more difficult to understand. Dr. Gilak had witnessed human soldiers fight through injuries that would have been fatal to his own people, but even their bodies had limits. As the hours passed and more injured soldiers were brought in, it became clear to Dr. Gilak that no amount of medicine or technology could keep the humans from succumbing to the weight of war. They were running on empty, physically and emotionally. The morale of the troops was at an all-time low. The sound of victory had long since faded, replaced by the sound of desperate, exhausted soldiers fighting not for triumph, but simply to survive the next hour, the next minute. He had seen it before, the moment when a soldier's spirit finally broke, when the reality of the war weighed too heavily, and there was no more fight left in them. And now, as Holt's condition teetered on the edge, Dr. Gilak feared that this was the moment when even the human spirit might collapse. Despite his best efforts, Dr. Gilak couldn't deny the creeping thought in his mind. Would the humans be able to endure this war until the end? They had already fought for so long, and yet it seemed as though the end was nowhere in sight. The Krevar were relentless, and each victory seemed to come with the cost of even more bloodshed. Dr. Gilak's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the monitors next to Holt. It was as if the entire human army was standing on the precipice of collapse, and he wasn't sure how long they could keep standing. Their courage and resilience had been extraordinary, but even the strongest spirit could falter when pushed too far. Dr. Gilak couldn't help but wonder if the humans had finally reached their limit. During a rare lull in the fighting, Dr. Gilak stepped outside the medical tent, hoping to clear his mind. The war outside was momentarily silent, but the weight of it all hung heavy in the air. The scent of burning debris and the distant sound of gunfire were constant reminders that peace was nowhere on the horizon. Seeking clarity, Dr. Gilak made his way to Captain Juno Graves, a leader he had come to respect. She had been through more battles than any of the soldiers, a seasoned veteran who had seen the worst of what humanity had to offer. She had a calm presence, even in the middle of the storm, and Dr. Gilak needed her perspective. When he found her, she was sitting quietly, staring out over the battlefield. Her expression was one of weary determination, but there was no hint of fear. Dr. Gilak approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say. "Captain Graves," he began, his voice betraying his uncertainty. "I don't know how much longer they can hold out. The soldiers, they're exhausted, physically and mentally. I fear that even their incredible will may not be enough to push through." Captain Graves didn't turn to look at him immediately. Instead, she took a slow breath, as though weighing the depth of his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm, but firm. "It's not about surviving, Dr. Gilak," she said, her eyes meeting his. "It's about fighting to live. You see, we don't fight because we expect to survive. We fight because we have something worth fighting for. Our homes, our families, our comrades. The Krivar may be able to take our lives, but they will never take what we fight for. Her words hit Dr. Gilak like a sudden revelation. He had been so focused on the mechanics of war, the injuries, the technology, the strategies, but Captain Graves was showing him something deeper. Humans didn't fight to merely survive. They fought to protect the people they loved, and in that protection, they found the strength to push beyond what seemed possible. They didn't ask for mercy or expect to be spared. They fought for each other, even if it meant their own destruction. It was a concept Dr. Gilak had never fully understood, but now, standing in the shadow of humanity's resilience, he began to see the truth. The essence of humanity wasn't simply about avoiding death. It was about living for something greater than oneself. And it was that very spirit, that unbreakable will to protect and fight for what they cherished, that had carried them this far. As Dr. Gilak returned to the medical unit, the weight of his doubt lifted. The soldiers weren't done yet. They would fight, not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to let go of what mattered. And in that fight, they would find the strength to keep going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Krivar's assault had been relentless, and now it was their most devastating push yet. The battlefield was a scene of complete chaos, with explosions lighting up the sky and the air thick with smoke and the scent of scorched earth. Dr. Gilak stood in the middle of the madness, his mind racing as he surveyed the damage. The human forces were stretched thin, their resources running out, their morale faltering. Soldiers were falling by the minute, either from enemy fire or the crushing exhaustion of a war that had gone on for far too long. There was no time to waste. Everywhere he looked, men and women were wounded, screaming for help, but there was no one to assist them. Dr. Gilak's hands trembled as he moved between the injured, doing what he could, but it was clear that his medical skills were being stretched to the limit. There were just too many people to save, and no matter how fast he worked, the blood kept pouring, the injuries kept coming. The human soldiers were exhausted, but they didn't stop. Even when it seemed impossible, they kept fighting. Dr. Gilak watched in awe as a wounded soldier, blood pouring from a gash in his side, stumbled to his feet, only to fall moments later to help another injured soldier get to safety. The resilience of these people was almost incomprehensible. But now, Dr. Gilak faced a decision. The Krivar were pushing forward, and the lines were beginning to crumble. The soldiers were losing ground quickly, and the battlefield was becoming more dangerous by the second. If he stayed and focused on the wounded, he could save some lives, but it wouldn't be enough. The war was far from over, and if the Krivar managed to break through, all would be lost. Dr. Gilak knew he had to do more. His role as a medic had always been to heal, to patch up the injured and send them back into the fight. But now, in the face of overwhelming odds, he had to be part of the fight itself. It wasn't just about saving lives anymore. It was about helping the soldiers continue the war that seemed so close to being lost. He had learned much about human tenacity in the weeks he had spent with them, and he understood now that simply surviving wasn't enough for these soldiers. They fought for something more. It wasn't about victory in the traditional sense. It was about preserving what they loved, about keeping their comrades alive and safe, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, Dr. Gilak made his decision. He would join the soldiers in a raid, aimed at disabling a Krivar supply line, a risky mission that could turn the tide in the war, but also one that could cost them dearly. Armed only with his medical tools, Dr. Gilak joined the soldiers in a desperate charge, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a dangerous move, but it felt like the only choice. They moved quickly through the night, the sounds of distant explosions and gunfire echoing around them. The Krivar were positioned heavily along the supply route, and the soldiers knew the risks. but they didn't hesitate. The mission was simple: destroy the Krevar's supply line, cut off their reinforcements, and give humanity a fighting chance. Dr. Gilak kept his focus, his hands steady as he helped treat any wounded soldiers during their advance. The raid was a success. By some miracle, they managed to disable the Krevar supply line, leaving them crippled for the time being. But victory came at a heavy cost. As the mission ended and the team began to retreat, Dr. Gilak watched in horror as one of the soldiers, Corporal Isaac Grant, stepped on a hidden explosive device. The blast threw him to the ground, his body covered in debris. Dr. Gilak rushed to his side, but it was clear that Isaac wouldn't survive. His injuries were too severe. Isaac's last words were not words of regret or fear. They were words of loyalty to his comrades, his team. Make sure they get home safe. Don't let them lose hope. And then he was gone. Dr. Gilak could only stare at the lifeless body of the soldier. In that moment, he understood the depth of human sacrifice, the willingness to lay down one's life for the team, for the greater good. Isaac's death wasn't just a loss. It was a symbol of what these soldiers were willing to do for each other. They didn't fight for glory. They didn't fight for fame. They fought because they knew that without each other, they wouldn't survive. As Dr. Gilak returned to the front lines, the enormity of what he had witnessed weighed heavily on him. The human spirit was unlike anything he had seen before. These soldiers weren't just fighting for victory. They were fighting to preserve a bond stronger than any weapon or technology. It was a force more powerful than anything Dr. Gilak had ever understood, and it filled him with a newfound respect for the human race. They fought with everything they had, not for themselves, but for the people they loved. And in that moment, he realized that this was why humanity had a chance to win. It wasn't their technology, their weapons, or their strategies that made them formidable. It was their unbreakable spirit. And that was something even the Krevar couldn't defeat. The war had reached its apex, and with each passing day, Dr. Gilak's understanding of humanity grew deeper, more profound. What had once seemed incomprehensible to him, human resilience, their refusal to surrender, was now something he couldn't ignore. He had watched as soldiers fought through pain, as comrades rallied around each other in the face of certain death, and as an unspoken bond held their unit together. Dr. Gilak had been an outsider, a medic from another world, observing humanity with a clinical eye. But now, as the tides of battle began to shift in humanity's favor, something inside him had changed. He had become more than just an observer. He had become a participant. The lessons learned on the battlefield were not just about physical healing, but about the human spirit, the one thing that could not be replicated by the advanced technologies of Zetharian. Dr. Gilak had always believed that Zetharian medicine was the pinnacle of healing, a perfect blend of science and precision. In his world, their medical practices had eliminated disease, cured injuries with almost no trace, and extended lives far beyond the natural limits. Zetharian healing was efficient, almost sterile, but it lacked the raw, unrefined willpower that humans embodied every single day. As the war raged on, he realized that no matter how advanced his technology was, it couldn't replicate what made humanity so formidable: their ability to push through suffering, their capacity to fight not for survival, but for each other. The human soldiers didn't ask for perfection. They didn't seek a painless recovery or the fastest route to victory. What they wanted, what they needed, was to keep going, no matter the odds, to protect their comrades and preserve the ideals they cherished. It was during a particularly brutal battle that Dr. Gilak had a moment of revelation. As he worked tirelessly, treating the wounded and helping to stabilize his fellow soldiers, he realized that he wasn't just a medic anymore. He wasn't just a visitor from another world. He had become a part of this human unit. He had seen their strength, their sacrifice, and their unity, And he understood now that his purpose was more than just saving lives. It was about becoming a part of the fight. He began to integrate Zetharian medical technology with the raw, indomitable spirit of humanity. He worked alongside the soldiers, not just as a healer but as a symbol of what could be accomplished when two worlds came together. The best of both species, Zetharian precision and human endurance, could change the course of the war. And that was exactly what they needed. The final battle was unlike any other Dr. Gilak had witnessed. The Krivar, cornered and desperate, launched their last and most ferocious assault. Their forces were vast, but humanity had something the Krivar couldn't anticipate, a unity and will to survive that no weapon could destroy. Dr. Gilak moved through the battlefield with purpose, his hands moving between soldiers, applying Zetharian healing when it was necessary, but also reminding them, in his own way, of the strength they held within themselves. As he watched a soldier, nearly crippled from a previous injury, rise to his feet and charge back into the fight, Dr. Gilak couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This wasn't just about medicine anymore. This was about human spirit. He found himself alongside Captain Juno Graves, the woman who had taught him more about humanity than any of his textbooks ever could. She had once told him that it wasn't about surviving, it was about fighting to live. Now, in the heart of battle, those words rang true. The humans weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting for something greater, for each other, for their families, for the future they still hoped for. And that, Dr. Gilak realized, was the key to their strength. The battle was long and grueling, but as the final Krivar forces retreated, the human soldiers stood victorious, battered but unbroken. Dr. Gilak stood at their side, not as an outsider, but as a part of them, someone who had fought, not just with his medical knowledge, but with his heart. He had seen humanity at its most fragile and at its most formidable. And in that moment, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity would never be defeated. Their spirit was unshakable, and that was something the Krivar could never understand or overcome. As the dust settled and the soldiers began to regroup, Dr. Gilak vowed to continue helping them. The war wasn't over, and there would be more challenges ahead, but he was no longer just a medic. He had found a new purpose, one that would see humanity through to the end of this war. He had seen firsthand what humans were capable of, and he knew now that no force in the universe could match their will to survive. He would stand with them, not just as an observer, but as an ally. Victory was within their reach, and with his newfound purpose, Dr. Gilak would do everything in his power to ensure that humanity emerged victorious.